Hey, what's up everybody? In this video we are going to work on a 1/12 dollhouse scale of an old country well. We're going to be working with foam, we're going to be working with wood, and also seashells. Seashells. Check it out. Alright, so I am not good at cutting circles from foam. To be honest with you, I'm not really good at cutting circles in pretty much any material, really. Foam especially. I guess I'm just not used to it yet. And I never changed the blade like I should. But anyway, I ended up making a top and a bottom ring and then wrapping it in paper, which is what I'm doing here. Now, because I had to take the step, I actually had to do quite a few other steps. I had to Mod Podge it, I had to let it dry, I had to do it again. I had to go through quite a lot just to get this little bit here, which is why I used the Mod Podge can as a base for everything. So that was the inside ring, and now there's the outside ring. Then I had to fill it in because it wasn't, because I suck at cutting circles in XPS foam. So if you're really good at it, or if you have a XPS jig, well, not an XPS jig, but you have a foam cutting jig for circles. Circle jig. There we go. I'll figure it out, whatever it's called here in a second. But, you know, I highly recommend just using that, cutting a bunch of those circles, and like donuts, I guess, and stacking them up, gluing them together, and then you can bypass this entire paper process. It did take probably an extra, I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 hours, maybe, altogether, just to do the way I did it. So I guess if you don't have any of that stuff, this is the way you go about it, I guess. But otherwise, try to figure out some better way of doing it. And then if you do figure out a way, please tell me, because I don't think I'm going to do anything that's round anymore. So this stuff that I'm using here for the base and for the top of the well is actually 3/16 foam core, just that generic stuff pulled off the paper, and there it is. And then obviously I just glued two pieces together. So in this case, I'm using pretty much one size. This case, I think I'm using balsa wood because it's cutting so easy. And I'm gonna tell you, I like balsa wood. But as far as regular building material is concerned, I think I'm going to stop buying balsa wood. It's nice, but at the end of the day, it's too brittle. It's too fragile. You can't drill into it. You can't do anything like that. So I think I'm going to stick with basswood for the most part. Once I can figure out how to actually cut a straight line without shearing off of it a little bit. So, well, this is all pretty self-explanatory for the most part. Just putting all that down, testing it out, making sure. Now, I was going to do shingles, but this build started taking a lot longer than I anticipated. So I opted out of the shingles, so I never get around to it in this video, but something I'll probably end up doing later. So now I'm piecing out everything from the template that I had created. Now in this phase, the template is like completely wrong. So I had to change a lot of the template after I finished this based on the model, because it didn't work out. So this is one of the reasons why I did balsa on the sides, because I don't have a whole lot of really great tools. So I had to cut into it and get squares, and I just wasn't really into that. Trying to do that in basswood. So, which it worked out, but I still would prefer to have everything in basswood because the stain doesn't match. So, here I am cutting out all of the pieces that I need, figuring out, making sure that they're all there, and then I'm gluing them back. Now, I'm using tacky glue on this because I wasn't quite certain if it was going to work. So I had to go ahead and use tacky glue just so I had a little bit of work time in figuring out what's going on. Eventually I figured out that the way I decided to do that was wrong. The way that I'm doing right here, I am putting the supports up before I put those in. I thought it was a good idea. it's a very bad idea. Definitely don't do that. It's because this is right here. I screwed up and I had to extend the the pieces there, the support pieces, to actually fit in the rafters there on the wood, because I didn't plan correctly for the support beams to actually, because my original design had the support beams attached to it as one continuous thing, like it would be normally in life. But because of the width of the well and because of everything else, I had to make exceptions. So I at least did that one thing right and left that one support beam off until I got the beams in there. This is actually an effective way. It worked. I just don't know if it was the best way of doing it. So I just glued three of those together and made one. I don't know the best way of saying this, but honestly, those three pieces put together, I was going to sand them down, kind of clean them up a little bit, but that's why I decided to wrap string around it and just sort of hide all of that. That way I didn't have to bother with trying to sand it all down again, because I really didn't have anything to sand it with except manual sandpaper, and that just felt like that was going to take too long. So this what I'm working with right now is just those little round sticks that you can get, like stirring sticks or whatever. And I had to cut a little edge so I can create a wedge inside of it. This way, when it goes in, it won't slide completely through and mess everything up. That took a little while to do, and there's probably a much better way of doing that. So, but that was the way I chose. So here's where I had to just basically sort of reinvent my original design, and I'm just kind of creating these little step-ups to help support just in case it needed it. It really didn't need it. The foam was in there, just those 2-ply was just more than enough, but it helped. And I was going to make it to where you could take it back off of the well, but I inevitably just glued it all together so that way it wouldn't fall apart on me accidentally. So this is a stain that I made. I used it, I think, on the church a little bit. This is some leftover stuff that I went back and tried to redo, but I think I made it too strong, or I didn't shake it up correctly when I was doing it or whatever. But this is really, really, really strong stain. And I'm having a lot of trouble getting in a lot of these little cracks and crevices here. And because the stain and the raw wood is so different in contrast, they really do stand out quite a bit. And because of all this extra glue, I end up getting all these little spots all over the place that I had to eventually go back and paint with brown paint just to kind of, fill in the gap there. So this is me just kind of doing it over and over and over again. I think I'm pointing out like where it bled through from the cracks and stained it heavier, blah, 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 this texture and stuff like that. I don't know. But, okay, so here's the shells. This is actually the thing I was hoping would work out, and I think did. So this is, I'm just getting crushed shells that I bought at the store and finding the big ones, the big pieces that don't have too heavy a texture on them. And I'm just using this sort of lightweight drywall compound. And so here we go. I just took it out at a fast speed so you could take a look at it here. And it really worked out well, I think. I mean, honestly, it looked pretty just leaving it the way it was, but I inevitably ended up painting it. But see, you push them in just enough to actually make the drywall compound kind of squeeze out on the edges and kind of create that authentic look that the stones were pushed in, to help keep the concrete from falling apart. So, in this case, it's almost the exact same process if it were real scale. But so I had to separate the big pieces from some of the small pieces, and then I just sort of wedged them around. I had the little stick. I had to wedge some XPS foam in there so I could hold on to it. I was afraid that this sort of lightweight foam would peel off, and it might cause some problems with the paper. This is reason why I say that you don't really need the paper as long as you can cut a decent circle, because if you can do that, then when you put the drywall compound over, you're going to really get rid of all that extra problem. And a little bit of deformation in the edges would just make it look more authentic. Mine kind of looks like it was made in a factory. But so you don't want to use shells that are super like shell shape. You know what I mean? Like the texture is curved and waved, because it just doesn't look natural. There aren't really curls and waves in a whole lot of rock, especially creekstone, stuff like that. So anyway, I jump ahead here because there's no point in really seeing me do all of that all over again. I put the small shells on the inside because the big ones were honestly too big and they weren't fitting in a circle good enough. So I just used small ones, fill it in. Now I'm obviously just Mod Podging because I thought this is pretty much going to seal up that really glossy shell finish. It does not. You definitely can, after all of this, still scratch off and peel off the stuff off of the shells pretty easily if it gets nicked a little bit. So after 3 or 4 coats of paint and dry brushing and everything else, it was still would nick off. If see right there, it just rubbed off, that little brown spot there. It just completely rubbed off, and I had some troubles with texture. It wasn't really messing around, but I think I needed to prime it with an oil base to really get it to stick in there. Or you could just use like super glue, I guess. I'll use a lot of it, but it would probably bond pretty well to it. I say the easiest way and the cheapest way is probably just to prime it with oil. So now I'm not liking the original color, and here I am going back and trying to fix it with some extra grays. I stained the string, and I stained the pole, which didn't do a very good job. This is me finding out that my stains are really horrible. So here I am finally deciding that I'm going to go ahead and use that black stain again, trying to cover in some of the imperfections. I painted that base black, so then that way, if you ever were able to look down, it'd just, it'd be dark. And I didn't want to have to sort of reach the brush in there and do it after I had glued it all down. So now that I'm finally happy with the stain, again, I had to go back and touch up some spots where the Mod Podge and tacky glue had sealed the wood before I could stain it. So now I'm just going through and sealing it all and staining it all. I use this really stringy string, a lot of fiber in the string, a lot of raveling out. It was horrible, which is why I Mod Podged it as well to try to keep the fiber from untethering, something, I don't know, coming undone. It didn't work. So use a finer string. It might look, just find something that looks a bit more realistic, maybe like a cotton yarn, something that'll soak up Mod Podge a lot easier and become stiff. But it depends on if you're going to use the rope, as it were. So this is me deciding to, instead of a foam top, I decided to make it out of wood. So this way it sort of matches the baseline and everything, the base of the roof. So here I am using the same stain to match, trying to, not waste it, but not really being very happy with it. Now in this video, it looks a lot redder than what it really is. So this is a bit more natural color right here. It's now that it's dry and everything. So this is a more traditional well, especially in England. So now I take this lightweight patch, and then I just run along the edges, fill in the seams, and then just drop haphazardly little bitty pieces of shell there. Now this is vinyl patch. Vinyl patch is going to do this. I think you're going to see, yeah, right. So it's going to, well, there we go. It's in focus. It's going to give you, well, it's not a focus. It's hard to keep focus on this lens. So it's not water-based. It's like oil-based or something. And it's this vinyl patch. They don't call it vinyl patch. It's just, it does not shrink. And if it doesn't shrink, there's no water in it. So I use it to sort of create this like homemade trial, the concrete kind of stuff. If they were pouring this slab down for real, I wanted to kind of make it a little bit rough. So that's why I came up with what I came up with. And so now I'm happy with the stain. I'm happy with everything else. Now I'm sealing it to try to keep it there. So now I went through a couple different things trying to figure out this basket. Inevitably, I found like a little cup, from that you can get a little bit of those little paint things in, the little empty ones you get from Michaels. So I just grab one, pop the top off of it, and then I use these matchsticks that you can buy, and these craft sticks, and I just use those. I'm going to line this up with, and then I end up using a paper clip to just make the handle. I'm not sure if I made the paper clip now or if I think I'm going to use a paper clip later. I don't know. There's paper clips there. Use a paper clip. That's all I can say. So there I am. I'm putting a lot of tacky glue on, and I'm making it really, really thick. So in this way, there's a lot of room for the glue the wood to stick, because the little tub that I'm using has a lip on it, and it raises it up, and it's really hard to get these things to stick otherwise. So this is pretty self-explanatory. Just kind of putting them on. I cut them up a little bit to make them shorter, and just put them on until I filled it in. And then I left a little bit of room just so I can put that paperclip handle on the outside edges, and then use the rubber band to keep it from falling apart or sliding off, or whatever the case would be. And then and inevitably, I think I'm going to do the base here in a second. Yeah, here we go. Doing the same thing to the base, just dropping full-size sticks down because I just don't want to measure, and using a couple of smaller ones on the sides. And then I just leave it overnight, let it dry before I start to saw it all down and trim it up. So the stain, it made the well stick, so you got to keep an eye on that. It seals up that wood kind of quite a bit, so you got to watch out for that. So this little handle is balsa. I don't know why I use balsa. I should have used base because of the size. If it were any smaller, it would be a little more problematic. But yeah, see, there's the first one I made. It completely snapped. So I went to basswood. And I built it off camera, but it's the same principle. I drilled 2 little holes into it, trimmed off the edges, rounded them off, made it round on the things, and then put the same dowel rod that I used for the spinner itself, I just used for the handle. Just made a smaller one. And there it is, right there. And I should have used super glue, but I just used Mod Podge, so it took the whole day. And oddly enough, it still holds up. You can actually spin it to this day without worrying about it slipping off of its glue. So I probably should have done this before I put it on there, but I'm always doing things backwards. So here I am sawing off the excess. There's a better way of doing this. I did not do the better way. I did the silly way. Inevitably, there's the best way. I just trimmed it all off. Those snippers are fantastic. And there is my little bucket. Now, I was going to put the stuff on the inside, but it was going to make the bucket look too thick. So I just got a little bit of regular paint and kind of painted on the inside. Because it was plastic, it was pretty much see-through. And so it became this sort of translucent paint. And I just put one coat on it and left it so you can see the wood grain. And then stained the outside for real. And then, of course, Mod Podge. I used brown stain on the base of the well to kind of sort of simulate mud as people were walking up to it and getting something from the well. So I'm not to the stage yet where I'm going to actually like make moss and stuff like that. But maybe one day here soon. But right now, I'm not comfortable enough with it. So this was a pain in the butt. I had really old super glue. This was the first time I was using super glue for this project. And I had so many issues. All the super glue was like, I don't know, it was drying up on the inside and causing this thick, pasty glue, and none of it worked. None of it worked at all. And eventually, I finally got it to stick because I just took, it's basically like another 6 inches of twine that I glued to the twine that was already on there, and finally got the stupid thing to stick on there. I painted the paperclip black just to kind of look like a regular pail, handle. So I hope you enjoyed this latest episode here. it was interesting. When I first started this, I wanted to do something simple, at least a little bit easier as far as scale is concerned, scope wise. Than some of the other stuff I've been working on, and some of the other stuff I've planned. So I was like, well, it should be pretty easy for the most part. And there were things that I had to change as I was going through this, just like I always do. Some stuff and the way I did it will not reflect in a template. Basically cutting the well out. I used the paper method and wrapped it and took a few more steps in that process because I just could not get 1/2 inch XPS foam to just do a nice enough circle for me. I do have a foam cutter, I just don't have any kind of circular jig, and I didn't want to wait to order one. And so I just figured out a different way, and it actually ended up working, I think. It was a little squishy at first, but by the time that all the layers got on there and everything got there, it was pretty solid. Shells, first time that I'd ever saw that. I was just walking through the store, saw them, and thought that they looked like Creek Rock. And what better way than just to go ahead and throw that up there and have some scale. I think that there's a lot of potential for that type of stuff, especially somewhere between the 124 and 112 scale. I think that the shells, unless you break them up more, I don't think they're really gonna support like a 148, 150 scale. They're just too big. Well, maybe a couple might work, but otherwise the rocks would be about yay big, in outside the camera view for something like that. But anyway, I actually kind of really enjoyed this one. It just made me appreciate that even the more simplified, or at least the things that you think are more simplified, when you're planning this stuff, you can find that there's so much more effort and so much more time, and that you can put into just even the simplest design, and just do the best you possibly can. I'm still learning this whole process. Making models seems to come natural to me, at least I feel like it does, but I'm still lacking on sort of the paint and the paint scheme system here. I'm still trying to get used to this medium, along with, and more particularly, the stains. I just can't wrap my head around it, and get it right. I think for my taste, it's always too strong. Everything ends up turning out just gray and black, and that's frustrating. And I've used multiple colors along the way. I don't know. It's something that I have to learn. It's something I'm trying to get better with, and then hopefully that will happen as time goes on. I know that I have a couple other models here planned, some bigger ones, in the next couple of months. And unfortunately, they don't have a whole lot of color to them. So there's a couple other ones I'm going to have to try to put forward, and maybe do some miniatures. At least I can put some color in there somewhere along the line, so I just don't have this sort of gray-black scheme through everything. Other than that, though, I guess that's it. I hope you enjoyed it. And I say, if you do, please like this video, subscribe, do all that social media stuff. But most importantly, please go to my Patreon. Go there, contribute, be a member, help me out. So until then, keep building.